My wife handed me divorce papers at my birthday dinner. She thought I would beg, maybe cry, maybe fall apart right there at the table. But instead, I signed them, and without a word, I handed the papers to her lover. The room went silent. Nobody expected that. Before I dive into the full story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and leave a comment. Stories like this one are real, raw, and they'll keep you on the edge of your seat. It all started on what should have been a perfect evening. My name is Richard, and I had just turned 55. My wife, Amanda, had insisted on hosting a big dinner at our favorite steakhouse. She invited all of our closest friends, my sister Diane, even my business partner Carl. I thought it was going to be a night of laughter, good food, and maybe a glass too many of red wine. Instead, it turned into a scene out of some twisted drama. The evening began normally. People clinked glasses, toasted to me, and Amanda put on her perfect smile, the one she used when she wanted everyone to think she had everything under control. She leaned over, whispered in my ear, "Wait until you see your gift." I thought nothing of it. Maybe a watch, maybe something sentimental. But then, when the dessert came out, she stood up and tapped her glass like she was about to give a speech. "Richard," she said with this theatrical pause, "we've been through so much together. And tonight, I want to give you the gift of honesty." She reached into her purse, pulled out a manila envelope, and slid it across the table in front of me. My heart sank as I opened it and saw the papers. Divorce. Right there, in bold black letters. My own name spelled out on the first page. I remember looking up. All eyes were on me. Friends, family, everyone frozen in place. I could feel Carl's hand tighten around his wine glass. Diane's mouth slightly open in disbelief. Amanda's face was calm, smug even, as if she was waiting for me to break. And then I saw him, her so-called friend, a man named Mark, sitting right beside her, avoiding my gaze but with the faintest trace of a smirk tugging at his lips. That's when everything inside me shifted. Instead of anger, instead of heartbreak, I felt clarity. A strange calm washed over me. I picked up the pen, flipped through the pages, and signed my name where it needed to go. Amanda's expression faltered. She hadn't expected that. Without hesitation, I turned to Mark, handed him the papers, and said, "These belong to you more than me." The silence that followed was suffocating. You could have heard a pin drop. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor, cutting through the tension like a blade. I looked around the table, saw faces frozen in disbelief, Amanda's cheeks flushing with anger, Mark fumbling with the papers in his hands. No one said a word as I walked out of that restaurant, leaving behind the smell of charred steak and betrayal. That was the night everything changed. The night I realized that sometimes the best response to cruelty isn't rage, but silence and dignity. After that night, I walked out of the restaurant and into the cool evening air, and I swear it felt like I had shed a skin I'd been wearing for years. The city lights blurred together as I walked with no real destination, just wanting to put as much distance as I could between myself and that suffocating dinner table. I ended up in a small bar I hadn't been to in decades, the kind of place with dim lights, a jukebox that still played old rock songs, and bartenders who didn't ask too many questions. I sat down, ordered a whiskey neat, and finally let myself breathe. People always say that in moments of crisis, you either fall apart or you wake up. And that night I woke up. For the first time in years, I realized I had been sleepwalking through a marriage that was more about appearances than love. Amanda had been growing colder, more distant, always glued to her phone, always with some excuse. Deep down I had known, but I didn't want to admit it. Seeing Mark there at the table, practically parading as her escort, confirmed everything I had ignored. But instead of mourning, I felt something else, relief. I didn't know her my pain, and I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of seeing me unravel. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding head but a strange sense of freedom. I poured myself a coffee, sat in the quiet of my house, and looked around. The place was filled with Amanda's touches, her expensive decor, her countless scented candles, photos of vacations where we had smiled for the camera but hadn't really smiled at each other in years. I started boxing things up. Not hers, not yet, but my own reminders of a life I wanted to reclaim. Old books I hadn't touched in years, vinyl records gathering dust, even my fishing gear that had been shoved in the garage because Amanda thought it was tacky. That morning I promised myself something. I was going to rebuild, and I was going to do it my way. Of course, The calls started pouring in. Diane called first, furious at Amanda, heartbroken for me. Carl left me a voicemail that was half apology and half disbelief. Friends texted me things like, "Man, are you okay?" But I ignored most of it. I didn't want pity. What I wanted was silence, time to think, time to plan. Amanda tried calling too, and those I ignored completely. What could she possibly say? "Happy birthday, sorry I ruined your life?" No. She had made her choice, and I had made mine. Within a week, I had a lawyer. Smooth guy named Thomas, sharp as a razor, who didn't waste words. He looked at the papers Amanda had served me and smirked. "She thought you'd just sign these and roll over. Good thing you came to me." He redrafted, made sure the assets were split fairly, made sure I didn't walk away with nothing. Amanda had underestimated me. She thought her little public stunt would humiliate me into compliance. Instead, it pushed me to fight smarter. During those weeks, I began to feel something stirring inside me that I hadn't felt in years: ambition. I had spent so long being the dependable husband, the man who kept things stable while Amanda chased whatever whim she had, whether it was redecorating the house or joining some charity club that looked good on social media. Now, suddenly, I didn't have to answer to anyone. I started waking up early again, going for runs, reconnecting with old friends I hadn't seen in years because Amanda didn't like them. I joined Carl on a couple of business trips that I would have skipped before, and for the first time, I saw opportunities instead of obstacles. It wasn't easy. Nights were long. The bed felt empty. And there were moments when I caught myself almost dialing Amanda's number just to shout, to ask her why, to demand answers. But every time, I stopped myself. What good would it do? She had chosen Mark, chosen the spectacle, chosen betrayal over decency. And the truth was, I was better off without her. That realization didn't come all at once, but with every day that passed, with every small victory, I felt the weight of her control lifting off my shoulders. I remember one evening, months later, standing in front of the mirror after shaving, wearing a suit I hadn't touched in years. I looked at myself and realized I looked stronger, leaner, more alive. That man staring back wasn't broken. He was free, and he was ready for something more. Time passed faster than I expected, and before I knew it, nearly a year had gone by since that night at the steakhouse. My divorce was finalized. The papers that Amanda had so proudly thrown across the table ended up giving me far more than she ever wanted me to walk away with. My lawyer had done his job well, and I had my share of assets, my house, and a sense of independence that felt richer than any possession. But more than money or property, what I had gained was a new sense of purpose. I didn't want to be the man defined by betrayal. I wanted to be the man who took betrayal and turned it into something greater. Every morning, I woke up before sunrise, made black coffee, and started running. At first, it was just to clear my head, but soon it became a ritual, a way of proving to myself that I was in control of my life again. People noticed the changes. Old friends I hadn't seen in years commented on how I looked younger, sharper. Even Carl, who had known me for 30 years, said, "Richard, I don't know what it is, but you look like a man who's been reborn." It wasn't just about fitness or appearances. My career took on new energy. I started closing deals I never would have chased before. I took risks that Amanda would have scolded me for even considering. And for the first time in decades, I felt like I wasn't just existing, I was living. One of those risks brought me into new social circles. Business dinners, charity galas, events where the kind of people Amanda used to worship tried to look important. And it was at one of those events, a fundraiser downtown, where I met her. Her name was Caroline. She was elegant in a way that didn't scream for attention, but commanded it anyway. Tall, confident, with a laugh that cut through the stiff, pretentious air of that ballroom like sunlight. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, and that made everyone want to be near her. We were introduced by a mutual acquaintance, and within minutes of talking to her, I felt something shift inside me. She wasn't like Amanda. She didn't glance at her phone every 5 seconds. She didn't size people up based on their clothes or their cars. She listened, really listened, and when she spoke, she had this warmth that made even the dullest topics feel alive. At first, I was cautious. I had just come out of a marriage that had ended in disaster, and I wasn't eager to throw myself into something new. But Caroline had a way of disarming me. We started seeing each other casually. Lunches, long walks in the park, quiet dinners. Nothing rushed, nothing forced. And for the first time in years, I laughed without bitterness. I could tell she was different not just by the way she treated me, but by the way she carried herself. She was respected, admired, not because of who she was with, but because of who she was. People leaned in when she spoke. People wanted her attention. She had built her own reputation, her own success, and she didn't need me to validate her. As the months went by, we grew closer. I told her about my past, about Amanda, about that humiliating night at the steakhouse. I expected her to pity me, but she didn't. She just looked me in the eyes and said, "That was her mistake, not yours. You handled it with more grace than most men could have." Those words stuck with me. They weren't flattery, they were truth. And that truth gave me strength. Meanwhile, life around me continued to shift. Diane, my sister, kept checking in, reminding me that family had my back no matter what. Carl and I expanded our business ventures, and I found myself thriving in ways I never imagined. And then, little by little, whispers started reaching me about Amanda and Mark. Their perfect little world wasn't so perfect anymore. Friends told me that Amanda looked worn down, that Mark wasn't the charming man she had paraded him as. Apparently, money was tight for them, and the shine of their affair had dulled under the weight of real life. I didn't seek out this information, but when it came, I let it sit. I didn't gloat, I didn't chase it, but deep down, there was a quiet satisfaction. Not because I wanted revenge, but because life has a way of balancing the scales. Caroline never asked about Amanda after that one conversation. She didn't need to. She wasn't interested in competing with ghosts. She was building something with me, and I with her. And with every passing day, I realized how different my life had become. I was no longer the man sitting at a dinner table, blindsided by betrayal. I was a man with a future, a man who had rebuilt, and a man who had found something real. But sometimes life has a cruel sense of irony, and fate has a way of throwing us back into the circles we thought we had left behind. I didn't plan it, but one evening, circumstances would bring me face to face with Amanda and Mark again, and everything I had built over that year would be tested in ways I couldn't have imagined. It was almost exactly a year to the day when I found myself back in the same restaurant where my life had crumbled. Not because I wanted to revisit old wounds, but because Carl had organized a celebration for closing one of our biggest deals yet. He insisted I come, and Caroline, now very much a part of my life, agreed to accompany me. I walked into that dining room with her by my side, her hand resting lightly on my arm, her presence radiating confidence. People turned their heads when we entered, not because of me, but because of her. She had that effect on a room, commanding attention without needing to demand it. And that was when I saw them. Amanda and Mark, sitting with a cluster of familiar faces, people who had witnessed my humiliation a year earlier. My pulse quickened, but I didn't flinch. If anything, I felt stronger, because this time I wasn't alone, and I wasn't the man who had been ambushed. The moment Amanda noticed me, her expression faltered. She had expected, perhaps, a man who had withered after the divorce, someone bitter, broken, alone. Instead, she saw me standing taller, sharper, with a woman beside me who carried herself with elegance Amanda had never been able to manufacture. Mark shifted uncomfortably, his hand fidgeting with the stem of his glass, and I caught the look in his eyes, a look of recognition that he had traded lust for a lifetime of trouble. Conversations at the table grew hushed as eyes flicked between us, the past colliding with the present in a way nobody had prepared for. Carl, bless him, greeted us loudly, pulling us into the circle of guests. He made a point of introducing Caroline to everyone, emphasizing her achievements, her grace, the kind of details that cut deeper than any insult. Caroline was poised, engaging, effortlessly charming, and I could feel Amanda shrinking with every word. When our eyes finally met, Amanda gave me a tight, forced smile, the kind that hides resentment behind a thin layer of politeness. I simply nodded, calm, collected, unwilling to give her anything more. Dinner went on, and though I wasn't seated directly across from them, the energy was unmistakable. Amanda kept glancing my way, trying to read me, trying to gauge whether I had been destroyed by her little stun a year earlier. But every time she looked, she saw the opposite. I laughed freely with Caroline. I toasted with Carl. I engaged in conversation that drew others in. And all the while, I could feel Amanda's bitterness rising. the realization dawning on her that the man she had discarded hadn't just survived, he had thrived. At one point, Caroline excused herself to take a call, and that's when Amanda finally approached me. She leaned down, her voice low but sharp, dripping with the venom she tried to disguise as curiosity. "You seem different, Richard. I didn't expect to see you here, like this." I looked at her, calm as ever, and replied, "That's because you never really saw me at all." Her face froze, and for the first time, I saw something crack in her: regret. Not the kind that comes from missing someone, but the kind that comes when you realize you bet on the wrong horse and lost. Mark tried to play it off, forcing a smile when he joined her, but his eyes betrayed him. He looked tired, worn, as if the weight of their choices had already started to crush him. And when Caroline returned, radiant as ever, Amanda's composure slipped even further. The contrast between the two women couldn't have been clearer, one clinging to a fading illusion, the other embodying a future built on strength and authenticity. The night ended with a toast, Carl raising his glass to new beginnings and hard-earned victories. As everyone clinked glasses, I caught Amanda staring at me, her eyes filled with the kind of disbelief that words couldn't capture. She had expected to see a man broken, but what she saw was a man reborn, standing beside a woman who made her look small. I didn't gloat, I didn't speak, I didn't need to. Instead, I gave her a cold, quiet smile, the kind that said everything without saying a word. As Caroline and I walked out into the night, laughter still in our voices, I felt a deep, resounding peace. A year earlier, I had left that restaurant shattered. Tonight, I left it victorious. And the truth was, victory didn't come from revenge or from proving anything to Amanda. It came from rebuilding myself, from refusing to let betrayal define me, from finding someone who saw me for who I truly was. Life has a way of circling back, of giving us moments that test who we've become. That night, I passed the test, and as the door closed behind me, I knew I would never again look back with bitterness. The past was the past. My future was walking beside me, her hand in mine, and the world ahead was wide open. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Stories like this are just the beginning, and I promise you, there's always more to tell.